But so what I'm saying to you, as an alternative, while you all work your magic and efforts, what about an accomplishment if we could develop a redundancy in our energy system, a backup system? We know these hacks are going to occur, but what I'm looking for is how do we develop, while the magic is developing, how do we deal with it?
Ho, 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 it's magic. You know, never believe it's not so.
You're a wizard, Harry.
That's right. This just in. The House Committee, what is it? The House Committee on Energy and Commerce has declared cybersecurity, or at least one congressman has, magic. So I got my Harry Potter one today. We're going to talk about cybersecurity, aka magic, more malware, lots more other vulnerabilities and other things with another special guest. Today on hacking, or we're not hacking anything. Today on OT Exposed Raw. Welcome to OT Exposed Raw. Yeah, I almost screwed that up and maybe got sued again. I'm a terrible wizard. So what do we have today? Today we just watched it was a few days ago, House Committee it was a hearing on stopping digital thieves, the growing threat of ransomware with the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. And I've definitely got some comments on that later. There's some humor going on there, and I think it's giving us some hints as to why we're having issues in government policy when it comes to cybersecurity. But first, let's introduce our host, this time with another funny name, Pascal. And I promoted you, by the way.
Thank you. I think this name is magic, right? Which makes me think is that if all of those guys in the congressional came together and talked about magic, is it like Magic the Gathering?
Do not insult Magic the Gathering.
I just did, and
No.
I apologize for that.
Yeah, well, I promoted you to host. I'm now the co-host, and you're the host because
I'm the host. So let me introduce to you Clean Bow Dungeon.
Well, you know what? That's a good idea. Except for me, don't introduce me. But you know what? Since our special guest today has the unfortunate past to come from your past, maybe I'll let you introduce our special guest today.
Yep, our special guest today. He actually left Rockwell before I did, so I think I upset him
before I stole you from Rockwell.
Yeah, that's where we're sticking with. But Thomas House is on today. He's an old colleague and a friend of mine, and I'm very glad to have him on because he's the only one I can throw at you that can actually bite away. Hey, welcome.
Thank you, Pascal.
I knight you anyway. All right.
So I'm a terrible introducer. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell a little bit of your background, and what do you want to do when you grow up?
I want to be like Pascal when I grow up.
Doing nothing.
I want to be a real boy.
I want to be a real boy.
I want to be like Mike.
I do not want to learn how to dance like Pascal.
No, absolutely not. Normally I wear wooden shoes before I do that. But
it's called clogging.
Yes, clogging it up.
So I spent 20 years at Rockwell Automation. The latter part of that career in cyber. I started as a computer scientist and doing software stuff, automation, and then got from automation to security and haven't really looked back since. So I was more on the business development side, on the sales side, on helping our clients understand best practices and how to really sell cyber within their board of directors, et cetera, to get programs approved. And then I made the lies and Pascal did the magic to make it true.
Hey, and you helped me get closer to one of my main goals, and that's to get to every 7 continents, right? So we did magic together.
You went to
Yes.
Antarctica as well?
Not yet. There wasn't a single site there for some reason to go to.
You know, I would imagine there's probably control systems on Antarctica with all the scientific research and stuff that they do. And
There is instrumentation for sure.
There you go.
Well-
I would put a data center there, right? That takes care of the cooling right there.
I don't think they need help with cooling.
yeah, well, hey, if it's good enough to hide a Stargate, it's good enough for a data center. So, oh,
Yeah.
I need a video clip. So, all right, well, let's talk a little bit about you know, I don't want to get political. I hate politics, and I don't really go there. But what we're talking about, and I'll play the first part of that clip again because I want to at least explain a little bit about kind of where that was coming from and what the congressman was saying.
But so what I'm saying to you, as an alternative, while you all work your magic and efforts, what about an accomplishment if we could develop a redundancy in our energy system, a backup system? We know these hacks are going to occur, but what I'm looking for is how do we develop, while the magic is developing, how do we deal with it?
So, yeah, so this was the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, where they had a hearing on stopping digital thieves, the growing threat of ransomware. And on that, during that hearing, they had several industry experts. So they had Rob Lee representing energy. They had a few other individuals from Microsoft and throughout the rest. And I think it's probably who they had on there. But anyway, that I would say all in all, you know, and you don't expect Congress and congressmen and women to be experts in cybersecurity. And you don't, you know, that's why we have the CISA, and that's why we have cyber experts on committees. But I think that for the most part, the entire hearing, and I don't know if you watched it, but the entire hearing was a shit show. You know, I think that, you know, at one time, that same congressman the way he introduced it, he was basically saying that, you know, he doesn't understand what you guys do. It's magic to him. But he was saying that for the most part, he was literally saying that instead of cybersecurity solutions, which he called magic, literally, we needed more redundant solutions. And he went on this political rant saying that, well, you know, if we had the Keystone Pipeline and if Texas had the ability to connect to the grid on backups, then they wouldn't have had a problem, and blah, blah. And he didn't ask a single question, or he asked one question. So during that whole hearing, he went on this political rant, and then he asked, how would you solve the energy issue? He asked the doctor, the MD, the guy who was there specializing.
The only one not to ask.
In the you know, he didn't ask Rob. No, he went and asked the medical professional. And then so the medical professional, he starts going by there. And by the way, at one point during the thing, he says, you're Dr. Nam, or whatever his name was. He goes, I want to say damn. He literally said that. He's like, I want to say damn. And then he said, how would you solve this energy? And then, so then the doctor started talking about the solution, talking about how the lack of redundancy, blah, 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 for medical. He goes, I'm not talking about medical. I'm talking about energy. And, you know, how would you solve that? And the dude is clueless because he's not an energy professional. He's a doctor. and Rob's just sitting there looking at him going,
Here,
it was, and it was just like, but I think that while I don't expect our government, you know, and every member of Congress to be an expert in cybersecurity, the general lack of awareness, the general understanding that they had was phenomenal. And I'll stop there. If you guys have anything to say about that, we can move on, or if you want to talk about that a little bit, or if you have any comments about that.
I'm just gonna point out, why are we shocked? Because we saw the same thing when they talked to the Facebook CEO. Zuckerberg. They're the same kind of approach. And then again, I'll say, if I was one of those congressmen that didn't know what the hell was going on, I'd be like, we have an issue. Rob, what's your opinion? That's all I would say. Those couple words, and then move on. Have the experts talk about it, right?
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. So I could not let that pass. So, you have anything there, Thomas? Do you want to move on?
No, we are magicians. It would be magic if you had a fully redundant energy grid for everyone.
But that also, if you have a redundant grid, that also you have a redundant way of getting attacked, right? That opens up your attack, that creates a bigger attack surface by just having that. So I think it's
the assumption, Pascal, is if you have something that gets attacked, the redundant one, because it's identical, right? It's safe.
What was that movie? I'm trying to think of it, where they basically they compromised the backup system, and then they made these people fail over to the redundant system, and that basically got them hacked because they couldn't get in the front door.
Mm-hmm.
That was Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Iron Mountain. So, by the way, wrong one. On my game this week is Track and Field, which was one of my favorite arcade games back in the 80s. It came out in 1983. And the reason I put that up is because today was the opening ceremony for the Olympics. So, in honor of the Olympics, with that. And also, instead of magic, I went Jedi today. So, that's my type of, I don't know, little Harry Yoda. Anyway, so let's move on. And by the way, I have one last thing to say to the congressman.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I was waiting for that one.
Yep, exactly.
All right. In my opinion, the only magic in that congressional hearing is actually understanding what the hell they're talking about. That's magic to me.
That's magic, yeah. So let's move on. We got another story out of the government. So this was actually a couple weeks ago, but we didn't talk about it last week. So this is Biden talking about, now there's three international law, like three international law rules, like Ja Rule, anyway, for responding effectively to hostile cyber actions. And they are: sovereignty is a rule of international law. States must exercise due diligence to terminate hostile cyber operations from their territory. And he's thinking, come on, man, looking at you, Russia. Anyway, states may engage in collective countermeasures. And so, I didn't see anything in there about drones, but so I just really, and this, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one that much, but I had to throw it in there since it was mentioned in the news, and it does relate to kind of what the government's doing. And we have much better stories on what the government is doing. But I kind of think that, and I don't care what side of the aisle you're on politically, I kind of think that when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's all a bunch of talking heads, and at least coming from the White House, right? When you have things like DHS and a former ICS cert and CISA, I think they really care and they're really trying to do something. But I think anytime you have anything like this come out of the White House, that's just lip service.
I'm not going to disagree.
Cool. Yeah, I need a crickets banner to go up there. So, all right. Anyway, yeah, I just don't think there's any teeth to these three laws that he put out there, and let's not even spend any more time on that. In fact, I'm going to go Letterman on that one. All right. So, and that landed right behind me, right down my crack. All right. All right. So here's something a little better. So then, and I've got a couple different websites for this one here, but speaking of CISA, so they launched a new website to aid ransomware defenders, and I kind of think that this one also, it's just informational, right? It's not going to be. I don't really think that it's anything specific in terms of, IoTs or information sharing or like an ISAC, information sharing analysis center, but at least it's something. And that's one thing that they talked in the congressional hearings was that, hey, there's a website that gives you more information, and they were applauding it and saying it was good. I do applaud CISA for giving more information, but I don't really think this is what we need either. I think we need more information sharing on a deeper level.
I don't know. Again, maybe we're still in the first stage there. What is ransomware? and how to defend against it, right? Before we can go into any more detailed data sharing practices. Maybe this is a good way to get awareness and to get people to think about ransomware. If the news doesn't do that to most people yet.
Yeah. It's a step in the right direction.
Yep.
I mean, defining ransomware, I think we've already spent plenty of time defining ICS and OT for cyber people and the government. So it's a natural next step.
And I agree with that. But here's my point. Maybe I'm just a bit naive because, I am in this industry and I have been dealing in this for 25 years. But are there really that many people and operators and business owners that don't understand ransomware or don't understand the basic steps? And I guess the answer is obviously yes, because we still have customers, soon to be customers, I should say, that don't really understand the basics of cybersecurity either. And we'll talk about those here coming up. But I mean, so I guess I'm just being a little naive and thinking that the average person, the average business owner doesn't already understand this stuff. So, and this is something a little more. So the NSA says, and I don't know if this is the exact same thing, but this one here is where's my notes here? I'm getting lost. Okay, so this provides a little more guidance, and like I said, they're actually talking about, this is an advisory that describes over 50 tactics, techniques, and TTPs. So that's good. That's kind of what I was talking about, more information sharing, more details. But one thing that stands out to me, they said general mitigations include prompt patching. What environment is this? Prompt patching, enhanced monitoring of network traffic. Okay. Email and endpoint systems. That's fine. Monitoring, good. And the use of protection capabilities. Condoms? I don't know what they mean by that. Such as an antivirus and strong authentication to stop malicious activity. So prompt patching, antivirus, strong authentication. Do they know what environment they're talking about?
Well, isn't it true, Clint, in OT, you get an email and then you just click on any link, right?
Well, I do, but that's just because I like to live dangerously.
Only if it's a critical control system.
Yeah,
and
that's where I'm receiving my email, when I'm logged into my critical infrastructure.
Exactly.
But I guess, instead of just, throwing stones, and I'm, for those listeners, all three of them right now, and all three of them are probably employees, but over the course of a couple months, the non-live viewership grows. And so for those people that are watching the recording, that is uncut, and I'm sorry, but it's unapologetic. Oh, and we just lost a
live
user.
recording that we're doing.
We just lost a user. Look at that. I made somebody angry. And so let's explain to our viewers why we're making fun of prompt patching and antivirus and things like that in an OT environment.
I'd step back for a minute and discuss the difference between the two articles we just saw. This article is really more sophisticated, like you mentioned. This is what we need to show the 50 tactics, to show how attackers do it, what to look for in your environment. But if we step back and we say, hey, a lot of people don't even understand how ransomware gets into your system, let alone they have the tools to do this, then it doesn't make sense to put out detailed tactics, techniques, and procedures out there. Because if you don't have the infrastructure or the monitoring solutions to look at your environment, then you're never going to find these TTPs, tools, techniques, and procedures anyway.
I think it's tactics, techniques, and procedures, but I could be wrong.
Yes, you're right. I always mix them.
I think it requires an understanding in the organization between IT and OT and collaboration. There's a lot of what gets sent out is really more IT centric than OT centric. I mean, you can't promptly patch a continuous process equipment on a DCS or on a critical control system. You should be patching, yes, but do it
We all know that.
when you can. You can't stop patching in OT, but you can't have patching be the reason to shut down production.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you shouldn't have email servers there. You should have the networks monitored, segmented. There's a lot of good basic practices. And I think
But
things
not
like
applicable
this,
to OT exactly.
yeah, need to be just more clearly defined of these are best practices and generalities. And for your OT systems, here are specific recommendations. For your IT systems, here are specific recommendations because they're going to be different.
So the way I typically like to describe it is that you're doing all of these additional controls like segmenting, like monitoring, all that stuff. So you have to give yourself some time to skip the prompt patching, because we all know that once you're running a system like this, it can't be taken down, right? We got some control systems are up and running for months at a time, and if to take it down, it takes a week just to slow down the process and to go into maintenance mode. So everything we do should be so that you can externally secure your environment by external controls, by compensating controls.
No, what I remember, Pascal, is 20 years ago when I was doing projects for Rockwell and putting in PLC 5s and putting in RSView 32 systems. We were, as a company, Rockwell was actively telling customers, don't patch. Put the system in. If you touch it, it might break. So don't do any updates.
Yes.
And that posture held for far too long. And there are companies even today that don't want to patch OT. It's a fight between IT and OT to say IT says you patch as soon as Microsoft said it's Tuesday, here, go do it. And there's OT people who don't want. There has to be a balance
on the OT side. It's oftentimes the OEM vendor that says, okay, now here's the DVD, here's the CD with all the patches that we have approved, and until then, no patches are going to make it onto that system, because you don't want to sacrifice your couple $1 million DCS system for a patch if it's not sanctioned by the vendor.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't think that patching as a general term needs to be better defined for OT, because it could be patches are specific to the firmware of the underlying host device. It could be the operating system. It could be the vendor software. And all of those probably have different cadences of how often you should be patching. And you're right, Pascal, you cannot, especially if you're running DCS systems or things that are very regulated by your vendor, you lose your warranty as an asset owner with that equipment if you patch it out of band and out of their approvals.
Yes.
So it's a difficult topic to solve.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the losing your warranty and I think that it cannot be overemphasized to those new to OT or IT trying to enforce cybersecurity rules into OT that you can't patch like you do in IT. It is, and what I really like, I don't know if you've seen this, but back in 2019, S419, Art Manion presented when myself and Art Manion and then Chris Rios, I believe it was. I apologize if I missed your name, but anyway, it was we were presenting alternatives to the CVSS scoring system,
Mm-hmm.
and while I think that what we did in the IVSS is different than what Art presented, and Art at that, I'm sure he still does, but at that time it was working for US Cert, and they came up with the system of the now, never, next patching decision tree, and Dale Peterson is a big proponent of that. And as a patching decision tree, I like it. I really like it. I don't think that is I don't think that's a vulnerability scoring replacement, but I think it's a complement to a vulnerability scoring.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, just as a side note, no one's trying to replace CVSS. CVSS is a mainstay, and the base scoring metrics are defined and they're valid. It's the environmental and the temporal metrics that have to be different from the confidentiality, integrity, and availability model that CVSS uses. Anyway, I digress. What I'm getting at is the now, never, next decision tree for patching for OT. I think is awesome. I think you can't have a standard patching process So going with something like the now, never, next decision tree is awesome because they've modified that to be more OT centric. So where is this going to affect operations? And I think even one of the boxes in that now, never, next decision tree is, have you gotten vendor approval for this type of thing? Also. So big fan of that.
I'd like to see that tree expanded, and then because it comes down to 3 decisions. I'd say if your system falls in the never category, I think you need to start thinking about an application whitelisting solution, which basically allows you to never patch, right? Because now you basically glued your programs together, and nothing can basically touch it. And maybe in the next phase, you have different compensating controls. I'd like to see that decision tree expanded that way.
Yeah, and I think,
I think what needs to be understood by everyone in OT is that you have legacy systems, and you always will. And those are effectively in the never category because no vendor will ever provide you a patch to be applied to those systems. So you're on your own. But you make a good point, Pascal. You have to have compensating controls because your standard security stack, whether it's OT specific or a carryover from your IT standards, can't be applied to a certain asset class that's required for the livelihood of the business in production.
Yeah, there's plenty of Windows XP and Windows 7, and some of the early Windows 10 systems are now obsolete as well, but they're still out there. And if you have a Windows XP in there, you can't even get a patch anymore.
According to Congress, all we have to do is go vulnerabilities repairus.
Voila!
You got to do the smoke trick with that when you did that.
Yeah. So, all right, let's. This is a perfect example of how the show just kind of flows. We look at the news of the last week or two, and we prepare our talking points, and we go and I never realized that, hey, we could be talking about the now, never, next framework, and I could have had a slide prepared for that, but I'll put it in the show description if I ever get to updating the descriptions, which I know that we have a beta tester that keeps getting on my ass about it, saying, you still haven't updated the timestamps. Well, we just talked before the show, everybody, and while I might not put the timestamps in there, we are going to go back and put all the show notes in there, so I'll at least do that.
You'll have links, our comments, passwords, whatever we put in these.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And speaking of links, we could put these. Anyway, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. So it's your password. All right. So let's look at. Speaking of things that are useful or not, and the TSA announced a new cybersecurity regulations. This was out yesterday that they announced the second round, right? So the first round was get my show notes, and I think I just threw my show notes away. Here it is. I got some stuff out of order here, but anyway, all right. So TSA announced regulations.
You skipped an article, but keep going.
Yeah, I know I skipped. Yeah, because I can't find it. I don't know where it went. It was that's all right. We'll get back to it. But it was kind of a nice segue. But so they announced that and there's no details on this yet. I was going to really this is going to be a quick one. I was going to see if you guys know anything about it. But it's the first round says that you have to designate a cybersecurity coordinator to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have to review current practices and identify gaps related remediation measures to address cyber risk and report and the results. And you have to report. I can't type. You have to report the results to TSA and CISA within 30 days. That's the first round. We don't exactly know yet. We haven't been told, unless there's more details out today, what's going to be in the second round. And that's not what I want to see. Nobody wants to see my face big. All right. So, do you guys, have you heard any details yet about the second round? Do that we'll start there.
I haven't.
So
my best guess, Clint, would be that as it relates to remediation measures, which is the fourth element of the first release, was identify gaps, identify your remediation, and report back. there's going to have to be some guidance on that. Reference industry frameworks, reference IEC, ISA standards, NIST standards, reference something. So I'm sure they're going to fall back on what's already been done. How quickly and what they require for these pipelines will be determined.
So they're saying you have to identify gaps related to remediation measures to address cybersecurity risk and report. So that to me in the first round. So they're saying basically assess your risk and then report that risk to TSA and CISA within 30 days.
And
That's a big ask.
I believe the way they want you to report it is through an email. Think about that. Look at your gaps, look at the ways people can attack you, and then send us an email with the findings.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what they're saying. And unless I'm wrong, I don't know if anybody out of our viewers, knows any different. But I mean, yeah, they're asking everyone to basically have an assessment and then report the findings. That's asinine.
Although I like the fact that and keep in mind that first line there that says requires critical pipeline owners. How many can that really be? How many pipeline owners do we have in the US, and how many are critical, right? So that there's a loophole there that I think it only comes down to a handful or maybe a dozen of companies. And with it then,
Colonial's critical.
Yeah. There we go. Hold on, I was waiting for that.
I don't have a beverage, but for those playing in the audience, please feel free to take a swig of beverage of your choice. Yeah, but I'm drinking Dasani vodka.
Having them go out and actually look at their environment and the critical companies that already know with their state, they're going to be like, yeah, here it is, right? Have fun with it. But the other ones that don't have it, they're going to start thinking about it, and I think that's a good thing. Now, the details around it, I think there should be a little bit more secure way of sending those findings up to the TSA, and I'd like to know what happens afterwards. So, okay, here's my assessment. I got 200 findings. Now what? Is TSA going to come out and help you mitigate these gaps, or what?
Well, I think one thing that I'm curious about is, have they defined anywhere, like you just brought that up, have they defined anywhere what constitutes critical pipeline? Because like for NERC, right? I mean, there's a certain definition that constitutes whether or not you're susceptible to NERC regulation or CIP regulation or not. And so have they defined that? Or are they going to define that within pipeline?
Yep.
I don't believe it's been defined yet, but I mean, this is all in response to Colonial. They had to do something.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I knew you were thirsty, Pascal.
This is not for us right now, because sometimes this show's a drinking show, sometimes it's not. Today it's not a drinking show for me, but I know there's people in the audience that would like to partake and participate, so we're doing that for the benefit of our audience.
Yep. Wait till we say Stuxnet. Oh. Boo. Finally, we get to use it.
Yeah, I had to use that one. So, and you were saying, Thomas?
No, so I think it needs to be better defined. But I think in case of incidents like this that have the news and the attention that we had in that incident, all pipelines know what happened. I mean, these companies are talking to each other all the time. Yes, they do compete, but they collaborate in information sharing communities, in best practices on things that they can do to improve their security posture. So they're already communicating. So this is something that the TSA has to do something. They have to take a position in response to an incident, but there's a lot of work to be done to clearly provide guidance to these asset owners.
Yeah, I'd really be curious to know whether or not they're actually getting any real traction on this requirement yet, or if they're enforcing it or how they're enforcing it. That was one of the big arguments, or I don't want to say it was an argument, but a few of the representatives, witnesses, whatever you want to call them, in the hearings yesterday or day before yesterday, whenever it was they were stressing Congress not to impose financial penalties on companies that are like, in other words, okay, we just got hit, right? I mean, don't kick a company when they're down, kind of thing is what they were saying. Is like, we just got hit. Obviously, there's a gap, and we have gaps. So if you're going to just go and impose financial penalties on us right on top of that, there's a lot of companies that'll put them under. So
I think instead of financial, they should say, hey, these gaps were identified that caused the compromise. We're gonna mandate you bring in a professional company like Tregen to help you mitigate your stuff. Right? I think that has way more impact than just saying, hey, here's a $1 million fine. Because again, not only are some companies or are companies down and you kick them in the butt, but some companies don't care because they make $1 million a minute. So a little fine like that doesn't gonna change that.
Yeah. I mean,
I think the good news is that the silver lining in what happened to Colonial is that it got the attention of all other companies in that industry that say, do we want to lose the brand equity that we have and goodwill in the market because of an incident?
Yeah.
If for no other reason, that is something that gets the board's attention, is the goodwill of the brand, and a cyber incident is tremendously impactful.
We have about 10 minutes left in our scheduled broadcast. We have lots to talk about. We're not going to get to it all. Do we want to pick on, all right, where do we want to go next? Do we want to talk about some of the new things going on with malware, or do we want to talk about, we want to pick on Gartner real quick with the Gartner FUD?
I'm going to leave it up to our distinguished guest.
Let's do 2 minutes on Gartner.
All right. You know what? We should have a Jeopardy board and to pick topics from, everything like that.
You see a big spinning wheel.
Yeah, there you go.
So Gartner predicts by 2025, cyber attackers will have weaponized operational technology environments to successfully harm or kill humans. If that is not the ultimate FUD, I don't know what is. And
I thought Gartner was such a legit company.
Well, oh yeah, of course. I mean, so here's my thing. I'm never going to read like they have details here. Gartner predicts, I guess I will read them, that the financial impacts of CPS attacks or cyber physical systems attacks resulting in fatal casualties will reach over 50 billion by 2023. That's in 2 years, folks. What are we going to do? Even without taking the value of human life into account, the cost for organizations in terms of compensation, litigation, insurance, regulatory fines, and reputation loss will be significant. I really feel like I'm reading one of those. If you've been impacted by, if you've gotten cancer by using Viagra, please call our law office. Anyway, and so
side effects may include.
Yeah, friends coming over. So the what is Gartner doing? I mean, because if you go and you look at, they actually have. Look at this. Then they go in, and Gartner's not even they're not a consulting firm, really. I mean, they're not trying to consult in OT, but then they have this top 10 operation. It's like, oh, you're going to die, but if you do these 10 things, you'll be fine. And then, so it's like, oh, roles and responsibilities, training, incident response, backup and restore, portable media, asset inventory, segmentation, and it's just a laundry list of like standard IT best practices, right? Like, I don't understand what they were up to at all, unless they were just trying to throw OT buzzwords and FUD to achieve their greater agenda, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. It's like they're trying to jump on the bandwagon for this for the momentum we're having in this kind of stuff right now.
Yeah, I think it's a marketing ploy to get attention. But I mean, even if you look at the testimony that Rob Lee issued to Congress 2 days ago, he talked about that the attack on Saudi Aramco, that was intended to cause harm to people. Like that's what they were trying to do. So it has happened, but for Gartner, it's a marketing ploy, I think.
Yeah.
To just get attention. And to your point, the 10 things that they list, that looks like an infomercial chart.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've spent time talking about best practices and standards, and mean, that's the service that you guys can provide to clients, is to help them understand what do you need to do. You're welcome for that.
That's twice in one episode. Woo.
I know, this is terrible. It's terrible. So yeah, I mean that's probably all the time we need to spend on it. But yeah, I just thought that was ridiculous. And here's another thing that's kind of, I found this funny. Like this just in, memory corruption issues lead 2021. The CWE, the common weakness enumeration, top 25. No shit. So anyway, I just had to throw that out there. It's like, I mean,
is it the memory corruption of people who can't remember this has been like this for the last decade or more?
people that call cybersecurity magic, that kind of memory corruption. But I mean, I mean, that's everything we've been talking about the last 3 weeks with, remote code execution, et cetera, et cetera. That's all memory corruption. So let's get to something a little more interesting. So one thing we didn't talk about last week, but was on our agenda was, so we have a couple different things here. So we have, Sonic Wall is now being affected by ransomware, or a vector for ransomware. Now malware, there's modified malware, and they're acting like this is a big thing. It's like, oh, Mac OS is where's my other story here? There. It's like, oh, cyber criminals rewrite malware to target Mac OS. This is not new either. But I mean, it's all these stories that are coming out about. Here's my question, because we could talk about each and every one of these individually with 5 minutes left. But I guess here's my question for the panel, which is, are we really, in some cases, we are seeing a proliferation and expansion of malware usage into other technologies like Linux and ESXi and things like that. But for the most part, is this stuff that has already been out? Is this a natural progression and evolution of cyber hacking or cyber hacking of malware and cybercrime? And is it just being brought to light more because everything's in the news and it's so high profile? Is this all really new? Is this a natural evolution?
I think it's a little bit of both. Go ahead.
No, I think it's a natural evolution. I think it's good that there's awareness in the market, because some things you have to talk about over and over and over again before it's accepted as true. Yeah. So I think the more examples that come out in articles like this, that, oh my gosh, malware is targeting the Mac OS now, your phone is at risk. Like things like that can just get people. I mean, it's not the first time. It's not the last time. Malware writers are going to do whatever they need to do to increase the number of systems that they can deploy to. I mean, it's a natural progression to try and increase your opportunity space.
Yep. Yeah. Just any way to get compromised, right? Anything to do to get you to, or to get deployed in your environment. So they'll go wherever the environment is going.
Yeah. I think generally I think that's an important point, Pascal, because I think I'm less worried about the malware writers saying, okay, I'm going to take what I did that was successful on Windows and make it work on the hypervisor in ESXi, or make it work on the Mac OS, or make it work on a cell phone. I'm more worried about the fact that we have commonality in many different devices across a lot of critical infrastructure. And our adversaries, especially the well-funded state-sponsored adversaries, are getting better and better at exploiting the weaknesses that have been built into OT for many, many years. And I think things like this just bring attention, and that's what we need, so that companies realize that investment's required.
Yep, great point.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go for it.
I was just going to say that, I think that, if you look at the progression of technology versus, or sophistication of technology versus the hacking curve, right? And Del Peterson would show this for years, and it's been used. I've used it in classes and presentations, and it's like, oh, back in the day, it's like, oh, you have password hacking. And then as the sophistication of tools grow, you have automated password hacking, and now you have automated, point and click hacking, autopwn, and all this stuff. And I think you're right. It's just natural progression. And we could sit here all day long and talk about oh, look, there's this new remote code execution on a PLC, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this. And I think that while people may find that interesting and want us to talk about it, I think that's of less value to most people than to just raise awareness and start to talk about how do you actually prevent this in OT feasibly, effectively, cost effectively, efficiently, because I think less people care about the exact details of the latest vulnerability that's out there. I mean, your cybersecurity analysts and threat intelligence analysts absolutely, do. But when it comes to operators, I think most operators are more concerned with just, okay, great, there's another one out, but how do I deal with this? And by the way, I don't have budget. By the way, I don't have people. By the way, I don't know what to do. I think those are the topics that need to be had. But I think also at the same time, all this other stuff coming out, while we may consider it FUD or we may consider it stupid, like, duh, that's not new. To your point, Thomas, anything that is going to help raise awareness or light a fire under people's asses is what I think is needed most. That's going to be the most valuable out there, no matter how stupid we as cyber professionals think it is.
You mean we as magicians think it is?
Yeah. Magic wand.
That's right. Yeah. Fallacious Roectimus. Anyway.
But just to point out, so the article for the Sonic Wall I included because I actually applaud the way the Sonic Wall the way the guys presented this, because it describes how some of their older products that are often not supported anymore are the vector for this, and they're still taking time to go out and instruct people that, hey, if you have this, there is ways around it, there is mitigation, and there's a lot of companies out there that will just not care about their install base at that point anymore, and they'll just let it up to yourself to do this. And I applaud Sonic Wall for going out and actually taking the effort to try to inform people around this. I think everybody should do that.
Good point. So
I think, Clint, going back to
not me.
Going back to Clint, the first topic of government involvement, I think communication is critical, because I mean, if you look at what the TSA is asking, report back to us any cybersecurity incident or potential. I mean, you could say, okay, I haven't patched these systems for 2 days, and there's a known vulnerability, and there's a POC exploit in the wild that can take advantage of that vulnerability. Is that where you draw the line with reporting? I mean, absolutely, what Sonic Wall is doing is great. I mean, companies need to be open, be very forward with their customers when they become aware of these things. It can't be, let's keep it quiet until we have a solution. If you don't have a solution, tell your customers you don't have a solution. And that's what Sonic Wall did. And I think they should be applauded for that.
Yep. Or we're never going to come up with a solution because this is an old product and we don't support it anymore. Yeah. I'd say to these vendors, hey, you find something, go out to Shodan or something like it. See how many devices are on the internet. You know, if it's one or two, maybe you can be a little laxer. But if there's still like hundreds or thousands of these devices out there, be more proactive.
Yeah. So, and I think we've already run a little past our scheduled broadcast, but normally what we do at the end of our broadcast is we allow our guests to kind of talk on subjects that they want to talk on and give them the floor. But I think you've already kind of started doing that, Thomas, with, I was going to ask you really, well, what are the top things that you think, coming from an operational past in OT, working at Rockwell, and also being on the business side of things as well, from a business perspective with some technology, sprinkled in, what would you say if I'm an operator? What are your top things that you want to tell executive leadership or managers, not the technical people, but the asset owners, custodians, business owners? What do you tell those people when it comes to OT security? What are your top things?
I think it starts with really reaching across the aisle from OT to IT. I mean, what encourages me is that many CISOs in industry today are accepting responsibility or being commanded to take responsibility, not for just the traditional IT side of the house, but OT as well. And so there's recognition that it matters. There's recognition that the conversations have to happen. But to be successful, there has to be collaboration. The worlds are still, though they're converging, they're still managed separately. And oftentimes it's different people that are responsible and that lead IT security versus those that lead OT security. And if they're not working together, it's going to be a challenge to get anything done in a client. So if you're in the operations side, find out what your company is doing, not just with IT security and with email security and with database protections, et cetera, but are there specific things in OT? And you can drive those things, but not without at least the recognition that it's important with IT and some level of collaboration. And I think if you are in a leadership position, know that this is a board level responsibility and this is a board level topic to protect supply chains, to address, ransomware is it's real, there's a threat. At a board level, it's probably more of a scare tactic to get their attention, but it drives recognition that there's something to be done. And companies can get support from boards to fund projects, fund programs to go and address these issues, address the impact of the legacy way of protecting OT, which was to just air gap and wish for the best. And that's not acceptable anymore. Every company is going through a digital transformation, and you can't do that without adding cybersecurity every step of the journey.
Well said. And you used a word there that a lot of people are going to argue about, the word convergence. And I think too many people are hung up on their own definition of convergence. I, for one, believe convergence is happening and has happened in many places. And you have a purist out there saying convergence will never happen. So I have one thing to say about that word.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Here's the thing. If your industrial control system, if your industrial environment runs on Ethernet or IP technology, you're already converted. That's what convergence means, that you're bringing in traditional technologies and you're running it in your production environment. Now, we've taken it a little bit further, right? We have IT and we have OT IT. And a lot of places, those combined, they cross that boundary as well. And ICS is by all means a part IT and part OT. Every modern ICS system I've seen, because OT security, OT production, industrial environments are not an island by itself anymore. They used to be, but they're not, because you're relying on ERP, you're relying on MES system, you're relying on people who can go out and get a production order from an email system or whatever that's like. There's always going to be some sort of a crossing a boundary between IT and OT within your organization.
Here's the final thing I'll say about that. You can say as an operator, as a technologist, as a cybersecurity, you can say all day long that IT and OT will or will not converge, and you can be as dogmatic about it as you want. But at the end of the day, the truth is the threats have converged. Period.
You should have done it with a microphone, but yes.
It's an expensive microphone, so I'm not going to.
Don't drop the new mic.
Yeah, it's not new, but it's expensive. So you know what? We'll leave it at that, because we are now at the end of our broadcast time. We went over a little bit. These broadcasts are getting longer and longer. We might have to start moving to an hour, but either way, Thomas House, thanks for being on. We really appreciate you. Great conversation. It's cool because we're getting a great mix of guests, some technical, some business, some higher level, lower level. And, I think it's really cool that, you came on, you have both that mix of technical and business, and you come from the operational environment. And in Rockwell, unfortunately, you came up with Pascal, and
I
Sorry,
kept
but
I kept it as short as possible for him. I didn't torment him too long.
but anyway, so thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for joining us, Thomas House, and we will catch you next week.
All right.
Peace.
Enjoy the weekend.